Good morning. You guys are muted. Still no audio. There you go.
Oh, it's working now?
Great.
Yep.
Oh my, it did fix it.
Okay, well,
There
there it
just
is.
push a bunch of buttons.
Yeah, that's feels like pure chance. All right, we'll continue. Great, glad you can hear us all right.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you for those comments and the update.
So I will say, right, following up what we've been meaning to find some time to follow up on that conversation as was presented during public comment at a WCC meeting several months back. It would be great to circle back to that now that some of the TRB stuff. Well, we have got a little more space in the agenda now that we're meeting bi-monthly again. So I have that on my list of future topics, and maybe next time we can have some time to talk about that.
Great. All right, let's go to the minutes from July. I think we were all here. So I think we can approve them. August was sparsely attended. So Dave's just gonna pull up the minutes.
I can already say I had no comments or corrections.
Yeah.
I didn't either.
Okay.
Okay, anyone want to review anything? Okay, can I get a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Thanks, Reed. All in favor? Aye.
I
Aye.
All right.
Is that an on air?
Great. No abstentions, no objections. They're approved. And Dave, for the August 20th meeting, do we have minutes?
Yes, so you can either review them now if you'd like to. It's just one page and a little bit, so we could certainly probably take about 8 minutes or so. Or if you prefer to table till next time, we can do that as
Well,
well.
seeing as it was a non-quorum meeting anyways, we might as well just kind of go through it. Conservation.
So we had Reed, David, Kim, there was one member of public, Lynn Cootie, no public comments. We did not approve minutes or elect officers. It did make a number of updates, so I'll pause here so folks can read those. And let's see if I can, I'm gonna turn off the chat box here so that shows a little larger.
It was just me and Ken, right? So,
No, I was there.
oh, you were there. Yeah, you. Did you get clarification on VHCC?
Not.
Okay.
I'm gonna scroll down a little
Yep.
bit. End of that page.
Right.
Right. Is anyone still reading the first page? Okay, so then just summarizing remainder of the meeting, other business.
Excellent. It's good to me. I didn't, nothing flagged, so, it looks like it would just be for Reed and me to say, yep, those were,
Can I,
those.
can I just ask what some of the uh ideas or plans were that you discussed to commemorate Gary's service to the commission?
Yes, great question, Eric. So the thoughts right now are to, after some conversations with, one of my neighbors who's worked with Gary for years, uh, confirm that Gary both spends a lot of time at Five Tree Hill and has been active in the American Chestnut Society. And so the thought right now is to have a, tree planting at Five Tree, of a chestnut with some plaque commemorating his 30 years of service as an appreciation. And if, so Dave and I were gonna go out at some point. We couldn't make that happen over the last 2 weeks, but, you know, the plan will be to go out there, find a suitable spot that's appropriate for a chestnut. And, that's the first plan. Then the backup plan, if there is no spot available, to do something with along the lines of the bench, and at the top.
Yep.
And a plaque for appreciation, at the bench. But I think the preference right now is to do the chestnut.
Awesome. That's a great idea. Yep. Cool. Thanks.
And deserving of 30 years of his service for the commission. So I think that'll be a nice thing for us to do, hopefully this fall.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I did hike Sucker Brook and Five Tree Hill Trail and checked out the status up there. The bench is in good shape except for one corner broke off
Okay,
of the plastic, but the bench is completely functional still.
Hmm.
And the people I was hiking with, when they heard that we were talking about this, said, if you're gonna do anything, don't replace that bench, add a second bench, because a lot of times that one group is already at the top.
That's true.
Another group arrives
Yeah,
and
that's true.
they have to wait for the bench to be available to rest and eat a snack,
Mhm.
so. That was one suggestion, and then I also took this picture, which Eric can't benefit from, but. This is coming up from the Five Tree Hill sign, you get to that little field just before
Hmm.
the top, and the sign that
So-
says. Overlook 168 feet is has rotted off and
Mm.
fallen over, so if you get to
Yeah,
that
I
field.
saw
and-
that, yeah.
I mean, you could follow the path, but if there's
Mhm.
snow, people aren't gonna know
Right.
necessarily where to go, and it's pretty overgrown where you need to continue to go, so just a note that.
More signs.
More signage.
More sign issues.
You name the sign after there, but no. But in terms of the bench, that just,
Okay.
we were wondering what
Yeah.
state it was in, it's in decent shape.
Excellent.
I'll move approval of minutes from August 20th.
I'll jump in and say they look good to me, and so Reed and I will support the approval of those minutes.
We can abstain.
Mhm.
Yep.
I watched the video, can I?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, if you
If you
want.
watch the video, you
Yeah.
can absolutely vote.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, great. Then we can actually move.
Moving by me and second by Lynn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0 with 2 abstentions.
Two abstentions.
It's good enough. Great, okay. Wonderful, thank you for taking that time. My apologies for that gap.
No, glad we could get those off the table.
So we did talk about this at the meeting last week, so Kim's not here. I am perfectly happy and capable of doing a second year of chair. And Kim was more than happy to do vice chair for another year, so I think the general practice has tried to been to make these positions last for 2 years, so I'll say that will submit my volunteer for one more year of chair if you'll have me. And Kim indicated she would be happy to do the vice chair as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and it's a pleasure.
So the process
Gets me up early.
is pretty simple. We just need a nomination motion. Or a nomination that is seconded and then.
And it could be a nomination for both roles, right?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's
For
reasonable.
efficiency.
And then a motion to vote.
I'll make a nomination, but first I just wanted to explain to Lynn that one of the things the Conservation Commission tends to do is folks who are not chair or vice chair, when the next year is up, we try to have the vice chair become chair and somebody who is not one of the chair positions become vice chair. And it's a great way to learn more about kind of what happens in between meetings to get ready. So just if you're interested in it, it's, think about that for a year from now. New members, it's helpful to be vice chair and kind of peek over the shoulder and see what's going on.
And actually, that is a good reminder that Dave, you should be CCing Kim on the agendas that you sent to me on Thursday. And I think it's generally the role of the chair to respond to that agenda request, but it's helpful for the vice chair to see it.
Like, what if you don't respond and then you're not able to be there? And
Yeah. Yeah,
Sure,
I
I can do that.
I meant to flag that for you. Great.
I'll move that we appoint. Is it appoint or elect? What do we mean here? Elect.
Nominate.
I nominate David for chair and for FY 26 and Kim for vice chair for FY 26.
I'll second. Oh, sorry. I third.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other nominations for chair or vice chair?
Not for chair and vice chair, but let's wrap that up and then talk about treasurer.
Great.
All right, so let's do we have a motion. We'll do the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? No abstentions, no objections. Let's talk about treasurer for a second. Gary was our treasurer. Served that role for the last 3 years, I think, 2 or 3 years. Was very helpful. Basically someone to periodically check in on the statuses of the ERF fund, check in with the town manager on budgeting issues. And
Finance director too, I know, for where to invest the funds. and stuff
that's
like
right,
that.
yep. What to do with the ERF funds,
CDs and stuff.
yep, on CDs. So that's an open position and is anyone interested in serving in that capacity with Gary's departure? And it's been my practice sitting on boards that if you're treasurer, you get a pass on the chair and vice chair responsibilities. So that's one way to circumvent the 2 years circulating role.
I would be
Do-
willing to be, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, do we know like what the commitment is? And I know Gary and Terry before him met with the town treasurer or town clerk, I guess. But just wondering what's involved with it.
I mean, I think you know about as much as I do, which is that when we ask for follow-up questions about like, oh, what is the status of the CD, then what interest rate are we getting? Kind of like, okay, I'll go check. And then you report
Yeah.
back at the next meeting. So it seems pretty light. It's not like you get a bank account number that you have to then manage and actively do yourself. I think it's more of just like a report back to this committee function.
I will say that in, the long past, Eric will remember that Carl Runge was our treasurer for a long time. And one of the things he did that was very helpful is it seemed as though, not every meeting, but like at least once a quarter, he would refresh the financials so that when a question came up during a meeting, we didn't have to wait for the next meeting to know roughly the answer. He could say, well, I don't have numbers as of this month, but as of a month ago or a month and a half ago, here's how much we had in our different buckets. And that way we could make a somewhat educated decision and just confirm it offline. So just like
Okay.
to keep them.
Thanks.
I don't know that we have to do that right now or in this meeting, but I just wanted it to be said that we have that open slot, and if anyone feels like they are interested in playing that role, that's an opportunity.
Well, I'll nominate Reed. Because he expressed interest.
So, yeah, I'm willing to do it. I'm not asking to do it.
Okay.
Other things, but if, if nobody else is willing, we don't have to decide today if we want to.
Okay,
Kim's
that's
not
fine.
here.
Oh, yeah.
Kim's already had the job.
And she doubles on
Yeah.
the,
I've
catamount.
done Catamount as well, so.
So unless Lynn or Eric are more interested, then you've been provisionally nominated.
I'm happy to yield to Reed.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Thank you so much.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Can you?
I don't know.
I'll second it just to remove any
I
question.
nominated and seconded.
Okay, I guess I call for the votes. Okay, all in favor of Reed provisionally serving as treasurer until someone else wants to do it.
Boy, that could be until like 2050 with the way that motion's framed.
How about
No, it's fine. You could just elect.
fiscal year 26? Okay, so amended to say Reed to serve for treasurer for 1 year in fiscal year 26. Aye.
The ayes have it.
Yes, Reed, you drafted yourself.
Okay,
Thank you.
Somebody has to do it.
Somebody's got to do it.
Thank you.
All right.
Carl
Thank
sets
you.
the bar high, so.
I can be your under.
Yeah, maybe we can look at them together and see if we can figure out what the numbers mean.
But if you guys are colluding, then that means I'm never gonna get out of the chair. Just kidding.
Yeah, Eric and Laura,
Yeah.
just waiting in the wings.
That's right.
All right.
All right, great. A lot of updates from Dave.
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it brief, just a few but important updates. So the first update is that on last Tuesday at the Development Review Board meeting, the chair of the board elected to continue the application for a discretionary permit from CSWD for the MRF facility. And that decision was based on lack of conformance with the chapter 27.5, the wildlife regulations that are in the bylaw as presented by the Conservation Commission.
What does continue mean?
Continue means that, so if the Development Review Board essentially has the option to hear all the arguments presented and render a decision, or they have the option to continue the hearing for another date, which means they're putting off making a decision to provide more time for typically the reason is to provide more time for the applicant to change their plans to come into conformance. And the way that the Williston DRB mainly operates is they try to, and as planning staff, we try to help them with this, avoid a situation where an applicant is gonna receive a denial. If there is, reason to believe that they could receive an approval, if they have enough time, there's enough back and forth to modify plans to come into conformance. And that's simply because if you receive a denial, you have to start all over. So it's a courtesy to the applicant in many ways. That's the thinking on why it's better to simply continue an applicant as opposed to, just saying, okay, here's the application. It's if it ends up as a denial, you have to start all over. There's costs delays with that. If the application is continued, there can be discussion about what needs to change, and it can move forward on a quicker track.
And just quick memory refresh. On this one, they made it through pre-app but with some pretty significant concerns, at least from our committee anyway. And then I forget, they made some changes between pre-app and the, so after 15 years, I should know the next step.
Oh, that's right.
And then
They
that's where
essentially kept the building where it was, and they just rearranged the peripheral.
That's right. Yep.
Stuff like the glass.
Yep.
Storage and
Yep.
and they added screening. They did add evergreen screening all around the property for the light pollution issue that we raised with, or the HDA raised. So they made changes, but they did not move the site of the building itself.
That's right.
Or
Okay.
this one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So in addition to that, sort of those changes that we reviewed 2 weeks ago, they also submitted a letter explaining the difficulty that they would have with sort of meeting the bylaws, essentially. And it was kind of up to the DRB to determine if that letter was sufficiently compelling enough to warrant the non-compliance.
Yeah, exactly. So ultimately, as this hearing was set up, it came down to a judgment call. If you were to look at the text of those bylaws related to the wildlife concerns with significant wildlife habitat areas, they're all written in a way that the applicant must minimize or mitigate to the greatest extent possible with that site. And so the HDA is a part of this process to try to introduce as much objectivity as possible to that process. By bringing in a third-party wildlife expert, getting that review. Ultimately, there's a subjective decision to be made by the DRB about whether that bar has been met. And so, yeah, as you described, that was the way that you presented your recommendation, and how it came out after the 2 rounds of review with the WCC is, that it's understood that there's a compromise has been presented. But the minimum recommendation is to meet the 300-foot wildlife corridor that was described in the HDA. And it'll be up to the DRB to determine whether, an argument that is sufficient has been presented that cannot be met because of site conditions. So their CSWD felt some frustration. There perhaps could have been some opportunity to discuss and have more back and forth at that DRB meeting, but as such, it was pretty short and frank. The decision was presented, and that was pretty much it. There were some other elements brought up, parts of the application that needed to be tuned up to meet bylaw standards. More information requested on things like vehicle queuing, hazardous materials on site. Most of those requirements could likely be met with final plans. It was really the Conservation Commission or the conservation concern around the significant wildlife habitats that was the crux of the issue to continue. So we've been in touch with CSWD to try to work as closely as possible on what this is going to look like. Because of that continuance, essentially, CSWD is required to submit either submit a revised site plan or present more evidence for why a revised site plan is not possible. And with speed to approval being the biggest concern, or on the table for CSWD, noting that the results of this continuance mean more cost for them. They have to go out, since they'll have to move the building site. They're gonna have to do more testing and digging on site. But they're trying to move as fast as they can. They'll have to get their stormwater permits refreshed and all of that. So we're trying to work with them so that this continuance doesn't happen again. The request from Greg was, okay, so if this is how it needs to be, we need to be really clear about what that corridor looks like, where exactly that line is drawn, so it can design around that. So that they can have a chance at approval, a very good chance at approval in this next round, which is set for October 14th.
Seemed like the HDA was pretty clear on minimum buffer width for a travel corridor based on.
Yes, but where you draw that line from,
Where on the ridge you draw it?
yeah, where exactly. So the DRB requested that there is a follow-up to the HDA, so I've contacted Arrowwood. Aaron is ready to step back in and do a remote review of the revised site plan. And in about 36 hours, Greg Dixon from Krebs and Lansing turned around a revised conceptual plan. So I'm going to share that with you now. This is still preliminary, so I didn't post this as a material on the website. We reached out to Aaron to get his opinion on what that corridor line would look like. And because Greg had identified that if you follow this contour, there's a drainage here that juts out. And so if you were doing 300 feet exactly from that single elevation point, then there'd be a bubble that extends farther into this site. Aaron's opinion was that it was not necessary to follow the drainage line exactly, and that for the overall movement pattern on site, there's sufficient room to meet that corridor with a little bit of a compromise. So this is the line that was drawn.
The red line.
The red line. This is essentially a 240-foot buffer from the property line, just to provide a very clear rule of how we're going to interpret that 300-foot corridor. That actually provides a little bit of extra room.
In some spaces it's extra, in some spaces it's minimal. They're like the minimum that the biologist believes is functional.
Right, noting that, right, the 300-foot line is what the biologist said is the minimum required for a functional corridor, generally speaking. But also noting that, there is, animals can move through this gully. So it's more about preserving that overall space. So this is the revised concept plan. It's not completely planned out. There's still details to determine. And I wanted to show this to you. So we will officially look at a revised plan next meeting on the
Okay.
Let's see, is that next meeting? Should I look at it? No, we'll officially look at a revised plan on October 1st. So plan is going to be delivered by, I think, by the 15th is the date that was set. And then Aaron will take a week or so to review it and then deliver us an addendum to the HDA. And that will be reviewed by the Conservation Commission on October 1st.
So is this plan that we're looking at here contingent on all of those soil testing results and everything that they identified in the letter is sort of coming out favorable?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. Right. If, for example, they were to come back with overwhelming evidence that, this configuration doesn't work and there's truly nothing else on site that could possibly fit the constraints of the project, then, at some point, there would have to be a decision call about,
Right.
whether that evidence has been met. But I believe that the best way to move this project forward without any further delay, debate, potential controversy is to work with this constraint. And I believe that is a mutual understanding with Krebs and Lansing. So Greg believes this design can work, and the storm basins, right? you'll see the dimensions haven't been planned out exactly, but the idea is that this site would actually be some fill would be essentially brought in to raise the elevation of the building and the stormwater basins so that they can be deeper and have less surface area, which was actually one of the secondary recommendations from the HTA. There'll be 3 to 4 smaller storm basins, and note that in this design, they are also moved further away from the high quality class 2 wetland, which was another secondary recommendation for the HDA. So this potential concept design meets multiple recommendations of the HDA and really does do a very compelling job of working with those constraints, avoiding the identified corridor, and also providing additional queuing space, which was one of the other DRB questions. So it seems to be a really compelling design that meets the constraints of the site while responding to concerns of both the Conservation Commission and the DRB. And Aaron has taken a provisionary look at this as well, as myself as well, to try to do a little bit of this determining in advance now that we're this far into the project, so that they can now go out and do those tests and invest the rest of the money putting together this design, knowing that it's likely that this is going to be the basis for a compliant design. So there's no formal decisions or language that needs to be drafted by the WCC, but I wanted to key this up so you know this is coming down the pipeline. You'll have a formal opportunity to look at the finalized design along with an HDA addendum on October 1st.
Great. Thank you.
On
Any
the surface of
questions?
it looks like a positive direction. Unfortunate that it causes delays and extra work for CSWD, but that's the nature of trying to adapt to constraints on the site. So
I mean, just from looking at this conceptual design, it's obviously taking up more of that flat area closest to the road rather than elongating out from the road, which is sort of was the nature of the general conversation that we had with them when they were here. And I remember them being pretty defiant that this orientation couldn't work. That was the whole nature of the letter that they submitted last week. So I guess let's see if this will work or not. I read a whole letter 2 weeks ago saying that this couldn't work. So I would say that if it doesn't work and we come back in a month and it's back to the same original design, their letter was a lot of hand waving without specifics. And I think we would need to know the specifics of why does the storm basin have to look that way and be that deep? And why is the test results not indicating that this couldn't be a good orientation for a storm basin? It was a lot of hand waving. So like, if they're going to use test results as examples for why it doesn't work, like they need to be really specific about, like, this is the purpose of why we did a site, a sample here. This is how it's not meeting the criteria that we're looking for. We need clay, and instead we got loam, or we need sand, instead we got clay. Like those types of things would be necessary, I would think, in order for us to
have alternatives analysis, essentially. Eric.
Thanks. I think I know the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. That parking lot looks pretty large, and my previous experience with some of these projects is when we ask the applicants about whether or not they need all those parking spaces, I think the answer has been that it's to meet town code. So I'm wondering if, given the sensitivity of this project, if they do need all those parking spaces, or if they just have that many to meet the town code. And if it is just to meet the town code, is there potential for a waiver from Public Works to reduce the number of parking spaces, and then maybe that would give them a little bit of extra room to work with?
That's a good suggestion,
That's a good question. It's something I can ask about. I don't know if the number of spaces is related to that or not, so I have to seek some more information. It is a large industrial facility, so I think, you know, there are people who,
Staff.
yeah, there's staff that work on the floor, and there also needs to be visitor spaces, so I think with 43 spaces, yeah, I'd have to get more information to evaluate that. What I can say is that this design is about 0.7 acres less of clearing than the previous design. And as it worked out with the site configuration or reconfiguration, some of the areas that were allotted for snow storage have been essentially combined with areas that will be stormwater basins. Other changes ended up working out. I don't know all the details for an overall reduced area of clearing. But that's a reasonable question to ask at the Conservation Commission meeting on October 1st. And in the meantime, I can try to get some more information.
Follow-up question to that is, I can't remember if this facility is open to the public in the same way that the current CSWD facility further down the road is. Is this for a place where people can drop off their recyclables?
It's not a drop-off center. Drop-off center will remain across the road. It's a facility that those centers bring their materials to, along with other trucks from other further flung areas and drop-off centers. The current MERP center does offer tours, student groups, and
Even just the
I think
public
members of the
sometimes,
public.
yeah.
I think you can't just walk into the building, you know, there's machinery that, you know, safety concerns and hazards. This facility is going to improve a lot on those, but I know in the current facility, you know, there's a lot of machinery moving around, so you have to have a hard hat and a tour guide and all that. But my assumption is that this space will also be open to the public in that way for guided tours, but I don't know.
It's a significant educational tool for waste diversion and recycling improvements.
All right, any other questions or comments for this topic? Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to say is, you know, for just as a byproduct of the way that this project has developed over time, with, you know, last year them trying at one site and that not working out and moving on to this site and getting continued. You know, there are important reasons for all those various things, but one of the results of that is, I think, that the degree to which there is support for this project from the community has been lost a little bit on CSWD. So they, you know, I had a conversation with folks from CSWD where I was trying to reaffirm that, and they're saying, well, it doesn't necessarily feel that there's support from the town of Williston to build this project. So my hope is that, you know, this design, I think, does a really great job of responding. I think it's thoughtful and inventive in the way that it incorporates the HDA and other questions that were raised by the DRB. So I'm hoping that as we move forward from this point, we can kind of bring some enthusiasm to the way that this has presented to solve some of these challenges, and show that there is support for the mission of this facility. That's kind of me just speaking from my personal angle. Obviously, you know, you are a free and independent commission. I do not bring that up to set anyone's opinion, but I just think it's a helpful lens to bring to this a little bit of perspective in mind for what it's felt like as the applicant. Obviously, they've been trying to move very quickly, which has presented some of the challenges and some of the resistance to perhaps revising the plan a little earlier. But we are where we are now, and I think we have a good basis for moving forward. So just wanted to present those thoughts.
I believe there was wasn't there litigation that I thought there was, an appeal or something was filed soon after this new site was proposed. So they're dealing with multiple challenges, right? It sounds like on this project.
Right.
What was the appeal?
I think it was an appeal to their Act 250 permit application.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, Act 250 ruling was that this site did not require an Act 250 review, or that was the jurisdictional verdict. And that was appealed
By who?
to Sella.
Oh.
Very interesting.
So that's all I know about that. I
Yeah.
don't have any
I just wanted to
information.
bring that up because that may be weighing on their project team as well,
Yeah,
dealing with all the different challenges, so.
yeah, it's certainly been a long journey for them to try to get this facility on its way. So.
Great.
Okay, well, that took up a lot of time, but I think it was important to present. Okay, so Allen Brook Bridge update. See if this loads. Let me reset that. All right, so last Wednesday, or was it last Wednesday, or it may have been 2 Wednesdays ago now? I think it was 2 Wednesdays ago now. We had a site visit to the Allen Brook Bridge site, this time with the regulators, the state district ecologist for Chittenden County, Tina Heath, and Chris Brunel, who is the engineer with Vermont Rivers and Streams, who oversees stream alteration permits in our area, and also Paul Boisford with Engineering Ventures. It was great. It was really great to have all of them on site at the same time. It's been a long time coming. We are able to look at what is being proposed, and the biggest clincher and question mark throughout this whole process has been putting stone in the stream to armor the stream bank to prevent continued undercutting, which is just with the shape of the way this stream moves and the way water is, naturally over time, it will continue to cut in this direction, which could provide continued undermining and potentially threaten any repair that is made. And so Chris and Tina looked at the site. We talked about the use of this bridge, its continued use, how it's an existing structure, it's in a wetland, it's in a stream, and whatever the opinions may have been about putting this structure there in the first place, various arguments, whether that was a good idea or not, it is an existing structure. There is a public safety interest in getting it repaired, and even with the armoring, it is expected that it will clear the necessary hurdles for permitting.
Okay.
So that was a really big deal to hear that from both of them. But also, they looked at it from their different permitting perspectives, and they said, okay, for my department, this is what's going to be required. For my department, this is what's going to be required. And they laid out some of the hurdles that we'll have to cross in order to make this happen. Most significantly is that we'll require an individual permit from the state wetlands program. That requires bringing on board a wetland consultant, which I've already started working on. We're going to delineate approximately, I drew out this rectangle, approximately this area. And that simply because in order to get an individual permit, you need to submit supporting forms and documentation from a wetland scientist. So we need to get that done. That's going to be additional cost. And we will officially have to hire and find a subcontractor who has the excavating equipment and experience to install riprap. That's going to be a big additional cost. So that will require probably some more funding appropriation from the select board. It's going to require a sealed bidding process. And all of this together likely means that we are not going to make, we're not going to be able to do all of this year before you kind of pass out of the regulatory season for working streams. the biggest,
What are the limits on?
yeah, so the general limitations are, it's pretty hard to work in a stream in winter when things are frozen. You can't really work in the, when the ground is frozen. But in terms of the regulatory framework, stream work is generally confined to the low flow season, which is the beginning of summer, June 1st through kind of mid-fall, October 1st. Now, there's wiggle room if there's a sort of public safety argument that can be made. So I've talked to Chris Burnell about the site, knowing that we have people continuing to use it, the bridge deteriorates. He said that there is a public safety concern there. There's an argument to be presented. From his perspective, he thinks it could be reasonable to grant wiggle room.
Like November or early December, maybe, or.
I don't know exactly.
But that's what we were asking for, in order to, like, how long does it take to get through the permitting steps?
It's an open question, and in addition to, Chris's angle, there's also the wetlands side of it. And typically, I know there's a constraint on when delineations can be made. And that typically ends as well in October because the growing season is finished. I have to confirm if there is a constraint for working in wetlands outside of the growing season. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but I put together a memo to go to the select board, and I think that was presented on Tuesday. That essentially, this was requested by the town manager, and just cues them up with to get their sense of how they might want to proceed. And I wanted to do the same for the Conservation Commission to get your sense. And that is, assuming we cannot work on this over the winter, we're presented with a decision point. If we have to wait until next spring or mid-May, potentially, whatever that might be, to actually do the work on this, what are we going to do in the intervening 8 months? And so the way I see it, the decisions are status quo. We know that people use this bridge every day. There's a safety concern, there's a liability concern to the town. If you go out and look at the bridge, it looks bad, but it evidently does hold weight. It's not entirely clear how quickly the situation would deteriorate further. I don't know really who's equipped to make that call. If anyone would want to put their official reputation on the line by saying this is, fine to leave. But it is the status quo, and it's certainly an option to do nothing. Other than that, we could ask the builder to come in and take out that damaged section and install railings on both sides, which would effectively, remove a public safety concern, effectively turn both sides of the bridge into viewing platforms. It would also remove that route. People would probably be crossing in the middle of the wetland.
Yeah.
There'd probably be some community anger. That's kind of what I see comes along with that decision. There'd also be added costs to that. We ultimately would have to take out the damaged portion of the bridge in the spring, but by uncoupling it from the rest of the work, there'd be some extra costs, putting in those safety railings and taking them out again, all that. And the last option I can see would be to put in some kind of additional temporary support. And then just leave it as is over the winter, which would just kind of be like the status quo with hedging your bets a little bit. So I don't know who would be willing to put in temporary support or what that would look like or how much it would cost, but that's the way I see this decision point and the way I queued it up in the memo to the select board. I don't know what happened to the decision, but I did want to present that to you, get your thoughts.
But whatever we decide, I think the important part is we haven't had outreach to the community in a while about this. So I think whatever we decide to do, we should write a letter to the observer. And says basically what's going on with Albrook Bridge and just give an update on what we're doing going into the winter and what the long-term plan is for it. Because in the absence of that, most people just think that the town is ignoring the fact that the bridge is broken. It's what people think that leads to people saying, well, I'm just gonna cross it anyway, because it's gonna be like this forever.
Dave, would you do an interview with
Observer did reach out to me right after that
Yeah.
meeting, and I gave them information as I had at the time. At the time that I talked to them, I hadn't yet started contacting wetland scientists or looking into contractors, so I said, you know, optimistically, we're still hoping that we can get some of the work started this fall. It's also possible that we go into next spring. I think now with what I know, I think it is likely that it goes into next year, and it is a long shot that any work, save potentially removing the damaged portion,
Right.
would happen this year.
What kind of signage is at the bridge itself?
Just trail closed signage that periodically gets vandalized every month.
Periodically, every month. Well, I mean, Allenbrook is at basically no flow right now. So if you put up those barricades, it's just gonna encourage people to jump into the actual stream itself and potentially create, you know, some indelible trail impacts in the riparian zone.
And erosion where people try to come up out of the.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. I think that as long as there is low flow, that's what's gonna happen. And if you do put up a barricade, I think it would have to be for like obvious safety, like no stream crossings permitted, like it would need to be like. I don't know. I don't even know how you would go about actually making that. Cause if people feel like that's their backyard, they're gonna find a way to cross the stream in their backyard, right? And there's no amount of signage or.
Right, kids go to and from there for school access every day.
Right.
Community members cross every day.
So to me, like the main risk is that something in a freeze thaw cycle, which, you know, I guess we've already had many since it. But it could, you know, deteriorate sufficiently that like someone falls through in the winter, and then you've got, you know, a hypothermia issue and public rescue, that kind of concern if there's high water, right? So if it ever gets to that point, I think, you know, just for like liability reasons, the town's gonna have to do something like put up the barricades and put all the signage up and basically lawyer up to make it clear that, you know, if a rescue has to happen, you're not liable for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, that's too bad. You know, we don't want it fixed this fall.
Right.
But it is very low flow and it's a very dry weather pattern right now. So maybe it'll hold and maybe we'll get some wiggle room and we'll cross our fingers that we can get it all done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments?
No, I agree, with what Dave said. I think people are gonna find a way no matter what, so.
Yeah.
And, yeah, if they did fall through, doesn't seem very dangerous. It's pretty shallow.
Yeah, it's really a catastrophic failure that we need to avoid. You know, if it's saggy and whatever, but it's the actual falling through, so. Based on all the information you provided, ideal for me would be if we could reinforce so that there's no catastrophic failure over the winter, to say even if there is high flow and risks flow, at least nobody's gonna fall actually through. And then that would give us plenty of time to address it while also addressing the public concern of, hey, we've been waiting for 18 months to be able to cross this thing that we use every day.
The December high flow is what would concern me.
To dislodge something.
Yeah, like we always get high flow in
A
December.
melt of some
A
sort.
melt, a rainstorm before Christmas, whatever. It's and that's still, kids are still using it. There's not snow on the ground. So they're walking to and from school. So to me, like November is less of a concern. We don't get that kind of high flow, but man, December comes dripping and that's when the rivers go up.
Right,
sure.
that's when the initial damage was sustained.
Yeah, and a kid could
Yeah.
fall in there.
Yeah, and that's what worried me.
Who would do the work to your point, who's gonna be willing to do work and potentially be liable if it doesn't hold?
Exactly.
So,
Right.
So just to be clear, we're talking about reinforcing the bridge, even though the trail is closed, but we know that people are using it.
right,
It's a little bit of a catch-22, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
isn't that just like justifying people using it?
And I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying is that if we can't get it repaired by December, you're gonna have to close it, because I don't think you want.
Yeah.
I don't think a trail closed sign is enough.
Mhm.
Knowing what we know about the structure of the
Right.
bridge,
Well, there are wooden barriers,
Mhm.
yeah.
they're not necessarily effective wooden, I mean, people step over them.
Or
Or,
break them?
yeah, or break them.
Okay.
So there's always the potential, that, we could scale up those barriers. Would the vandalism scale up, in kind? Because people feel entitled to use this,
Mhm.
thoroughfare, because they need it, it's convenient, so.
Yeah, I think
But-
if we see a high flow event coming, like, I think we need to find a way to quickly dismantle.
Yeah.
Any part that is liable to just fall in.
Okay.
That would be my.
Yeah, I agree. I think thinking like a lawyer, which I am not a lawyer, but if I were a lawyer representing the town, I'd be very uncomfortable with this bridge open during a high flow event. I would think we to close it, we either need to, yeah, as David was just saying, dismantle at least the stream bank ends of it and leave the middle in place, or literally build a wall on each end to prevent people from being able to get onto the thing. And put
I
some
also worry about
serious
removing a
signage up at
section in
the
the
ends
middle.
of the trails.
Yeah, people.
Yeah, Eric, I worry about removing a section in the middle because some of the supports on the edge of the viewing platform are also largely undermined. And I think that the connecting portion may be providing some, I don't know, rigidity to it so that it's not wiggling and.
Yeah,
moving
sorry,
out.
I meant the removing the decking on the
On the
ends
ends.
of the bridge, not the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah, so people can't even get onto it, yeah,
Okay,
okay.
all right, thank you for that, I,
Well, feedback.
yeah, I will communicate that,
But does
appropriate, and
everybody
also
agree
feedback and learn.
about like, whenever we decide we need to do public outreach of some sort?
Yeah, I'd like
To tell the
yeah,
story
Yeah,
of what we're trying to do.
100%. I get asked that question quite a bit. What's going on with Allenbrook Trail? When's it going to be rebuilt? Blah blah blah. So yes.
I think once we have a timeline for the project and we actually know some more things about it, it's great that you talked to, who is it? What's his name? Bruce? Is that the Observer reporter? What's his name?
I talked to Trent, I believe is the,
I think I know. Right.
I'm not misremembering that, I believe it was Trent.
Yeah, well, it's great that you talked to him, because then at least we know that they know that there's
Plan coming.
an emerging issue here, and that hopefully when you do have the final plan, like, I don't personally, I think a letter would be fine, but like, I think the town should definitely do a full article with them as an explanation of the timeline, the project, showing some diagrams. Observer loves publishing diagrams for stuff like that.
Yeah, it's visually catching for
Yeah.
the audience, yeah. Like even just showing them that they were thinking about a plan.
Right.
Doesn't even have to have all the labels and stuff on it, just being like, look, we're thinking about
Right.
trying to armor this so that it
Yeah.
doesn't just fail as soon as we replace it again.
Okay,
And I can appreciate that riprap is not something that you can just send it, someone from Public Works in to go do, like, that's a full contracted engineering solution. Do you know if they're gonna be approaching it from the WCS side of the river, or do they have to go in through the subdivision?
the current plan is to going in across private property is just gonna be fundamentally more challenging, so
Yeah.
the plan would be to approach it from WCS side. Which also is probably the most straightforward approach anyways. With the idea being that this bank here, it would make the best access. And some shrubs may need to be cleared out of the way, but a temporary access could be made down to this area, which is where the work needs to begin. So the first step would be to remove the damaged section, do the demolition. Then the excavator would come in, do the regrading and stonework here, followed by the builder to install the enhanced supports. And then once
Yeah.
that is done, the resurfacing can occur.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just knowing what the flow looks like right now, it's like the perfect time to do this.
Yeah,
Like,
unfortunately,
it's like
right, it
now.
is because it's so low,
Yeah,
but there's just, I was really facing this last week, and just as much as I want to make it move as fast as possible. We may be done with we may be able to get our wetlands permit application in really quickly. That is certainly gonna determine whether there's any chance of anything happening this fall, but getting the contractor in the sealed bid through a sealed bid process, finding somebody who's willing to do that work in a sensitive way, and figuring out what it's gonna cost and where that money's gonna come from, I think that will be what probably slows us down into next season. So,
all right. Well, I want to leave enough room for ERF prioritization discussion, and
Which we
we're,
could probably shorten up a little
yeah,
bit.
well, so here's my thought. So yeah, thank you for that. My thought is maybe we could do, if we bump that to next time, I could put together some visuals or something that might make it a little easier to explain
Sure.
what we're thinking, just to carve us out a little more
I did
time.
read through my notes while everybody was arriving, and I could probably summarize what we've done so far conceptually really quick, and then we could say we can show some more visuals or details next time.
Sure, yeah, I realized that my time budgeting was horrendous for this.
no problem. I think we're all working through some important projects right here, so I think the time was well spent. I'm more than happy to get sort of a verbal update from Reed for now, if that works for everyone here.
Sure.
And then we can continue it for, you know, with further elaboration. Dave, I don't want to cut you short. Is there anything on the Commons sign replacement or trail?
Yeah, I can make that very brief. Our current quote is $335 for a replacement wood sign for the Commons Trail, a 1 foot or 2 foot by 1 foot sign for the Commons Trail to replace what was there. Carved wood, painted. It'd be $335 for wood, and it'd be $275 to use an alternative material, PVC, that would be painted up in the exact same way to look like wood. So it's cheaper to do the alternative option that is meant to look
Is
just
it
like
natural wood or pressure treated wood? Does that matter? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. My recommendation was gonna be, since this is a relatively small trail sign, relatively low stakes. Commons Trail is one of our lower use trails, still a great trail and important use. We could use this as an opportunity to just experiment. You know, the sign company is not gonna send us a proof. So if we want to see what it looks like to use an alternative material, in this case, it is cheaper. It's something that we might want to be exploring anyways for the future. This might be a good opportunity to say, let's try it out. And if the aesthetics are really not what you'd like in the long term for our parks, then there's no reason we can't simply recommit to an aesthetic and regular choice of materials that include hardwood.
Will the design of the sign be sort of consistent with the logos of like the big parks, and like I know there's like a sort of like,
Yeah, the gold letter or yellow lettering on brown. Yeah.
okay, but like the parks also have like a little peacock
Oh,
semicircle or something. There's like a design.
yeah, Williston Parks and Rec logo.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've not typically conformed with that in the past. I don't think any of the natural areas have
Okay.
incorporated that.
Okay. It's different.
Yeah, it's different.
It's not managed by the Parks and Rec.
Not
It's
managed.
not logoed.
Yeah.
Like that. Okay.
Something we could talk about in the future if there is more collaboration, but
Yeah.
currently.
Okay. I think that's an interesting idea. I mean, why not? See what it looks like.
Okay. Just get it
We'll go
done,
trying it.
get the replacement, try it, we can use it as a.
And if it's ugly, it'll last forever.
Right. Right.
It's
Yeah.
not like a high traffic, people aren't like
Yeah.
driving past it
No.
every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will. Yeah, be a good opportunity to evaluate that alternate strategy.
Great.
Random thought, but just want to put out there in case people have other thoughts about it for future meetings, that is. You know how when you're driving down the road and it has those black signs that tell you like 2 points of interest or businesses, it says like, you know, whatever, the MRI
Yeah,
center this
yeah.
way, or whatever, like half a mile. I was always wondering whether we should have signs on the road that say, so that people know where the trails are, like Commons Trail, quarter mile this way, and, you know, Mud Pond conservation area, and Country Park 1 mile that way at the top of South Road, like things like that make people go like, oh, right, we have a park down there, or we have, because otherwise if you don't go to them, you don't even realize it there. So just a
Aren't
thought.
aren't they the businesses that pay for those?
I think they
signs? Yeah.
do, but I don't see why the town couldn't have
Right.
an item on some of those signs that let people know which way to go to get to parks. Just a thought.
Yeah, worth exploring.
All right, thank you, Dave. Lots to update us on. No worries on the timing. So read it. A couple months ago, we kind of split up. Last time we talked about the orientation pages that I was working on with Dave, and you had some ERF prioritization work.
Yeah, so this work, I would summarize as, there's 2 goals, and we mostly are working on the first part of it right now, and so. We decided, what would it look like to have a passive strategy? Which is, as development reviews come in, or as landowners reach out to us. We have this prioritization list, we have these numbers that get spat out by a formula that tell us how valuable for conservation any given. That's really interesting, you zoomed in, how valuable for conservation it is. And we can act as those things come up for decisions. Then we should have an active strategy, is the theory that we're looking into, that is, what are we trying to do with the ERF funds? Other than when people come to us and say, I want to do something on my property or whatever. We're not working on the active so much right now, although we did do some initial like 5 minutes worth of brainstorming at the end of our last session. David and I met twice to go through each of these items. So there's a resources section and there's a constraints section. Resources are positive things that would lead to a parcel receiving points. Constraints are things that might add or remove points based on, like, is it on the sewer service area, and therefore it's more likely to be developed. But also we kind of want it to be developed because it's within the sewer service area. So kind of taking into account that steep slopes never going to be able to be developed anyway, that type of thing. So just kind of orient ourselves on how the formula uses different variables. Some of them are resources, some of them are constraints, and based on assessing each of those, points are assigned. So we went through top to bottom, all of these, and basically things fell into like 3 categories. Either 1, we're really happy with the way it's working right now, we think it's still effective and it should stay. We like it, but maybe the data it's based on is out of date, so we just need some updating. So we're gonna keep the factor, like let's say, wetlands, but we're gonna use new data set to drive the wetlands, if there's some available. And then other things where we're like, this needs to be added or removed because it either isn't represented today or it's represented and it's not doing a good job reflecting conservation value. So we went through, so top to bottom, kind of looking at these different things. We've got wetlands, where is that in here? Okay, so wetlands, it should stay, we think. It needs to be enhanced, and we have some ideas on different data sets that we might be able to use to enhance that.
There's a new data set being released by the wetlands program that's
like brand new.
Yeah, that has improved accuracy in its mapping.
Named streams. We're happy with that. No changes were proposed. Unnamed streams. We're happy with that, although we had some questions. Some of these items, you'll notice they have like a half mile or 5 acres or like different thresholds above which you get more or less points. And so we may want to do a little bit of tweaking along the way to say, well, is a half mile really the right cutoff point? And to do that, we would look at things like how many streams, how many parcels actually have more than a half mile of riparian exposure, if it's like one in the town, then why is the threshold set there? It's only gonna apply to one parcel. So there's some things to take a look at there. Not that I'm questioning Melinda because she's really good at these types of things. I'm sure when she did it originally, she helped us set good thresholds, but we want to double check some of them.
So
Hey,
all these
Reed,
thresholds
I
Yeah.
exist.
I don't. Are you sure that Melinda's the one that set these up?
Yes, Melinda did the initial mapping, the GIS
Oh,
layers
okay.
and yeah.
I thought this
It was
predated Melinda actually, but
no, the prioritization was done in 2020. So it was right after I joined and I
right.
worked with Melinda on the formulas and we did the 1,000 mines thing where everybody
Yeah.
ranked
Yep.
ranked how much weight should go to each factor and so
Yep.
on.
Okay.
Interior forest blocks. This was one where there's some more research needed to figure out what the best data source is for this. And this is a good example of something that happens where we sometimes double count things. So we have some other factors that account for size, but then we also have factors like interior forest block where they only get points if they are large parcels anyway. So we're paying attention to that and making sure that we're not double counting certain things.
And the data set is in 2023 / early 24, Fish and Wildlife released a new enhanced data set for all of the Vermont conservation design elements, including the forest blocks.
Yeah. So Dave's awareness of state level changes is very valuable for this because there's definitely some new data that we can bring in. Connectivity blocks, we're happy to keep and ERTs and unique natural communities and others. There's an opportunity to potentially think about whether this should be part of our active strategy, but they need to stay in some capacity. We can keep going. We have existing trails and paths. We didn't want any changes there. Looked good. Trail lengths looked good. Acreage. So, ACEL. Oh, adjacent to conserved and excluded lands. We were good with that. Acreage. So this was one of the few ones that we thought might want to be removed. So long as in other areas, we keep some of the factors that account for size, like length of stream, for riparian zone and size of forest blocks. So if we keep those thresholds where it's size based, in other factors, we can probably take out straight acreage as a value.
Yeah, and a little some additional context on that. So with the state's Vermont conservation design in their previous iteration of the data set 10 years ago, they used similar criteria to establish a ranking, 1 through 10 for priority of each different habitat block based on all these factors. And in the most recent release of that data set, they did away with that ranking system simply because they found that many of the elements just reinforce size. Didn't matter what you were looking at, whether it was streams or number of vernal pools or amount of deer wintering area, whatever it was. Ultimately, most of those factors, or not necessarily most, but many of them were higher with a larger parcel. And so they took that out and kind of let size speak for itself. So it's kind of an opposite approach to what we're doing here. Rather than just saying, okay, the biggest parcel gets a higher score, we're saying we're already looking at these specific factors, so we don't need to double count acreage.
I think I'm glad you're calling this out because this is the passive strategy. This is the strategy where someone's coming to us and saying, I want to develop it. And what do we do with that? And is the ERF a possible tool in that tool bag? Like those projects are inherently hard to use the ERF for anyways. So like if you had a 200-acre property coming up to, like if Catamount Golf was, Catamount Community Forest instead, like that would be really hard to like do it. I think a size-based determination And maybe my comment that'll come after that, might be for more of that sort of like active based approach,
Yeah.
like this is a big parcel, we want to do something with it.
Yeah, working with one landowner stakeholder to conserve a large amount of acreage might be easier than trying to work with 10 smaller parcel
Right.
owners all at the same time to get it to work.
And waiting for them to come to you with a
Yeah.
product. One thing that I wanted to, and maybe it's like the sum of all of these things, but like, I keep waiting to see something like exceptionalism, that that maybe it doesn't fully fit into one of these criteria, but it's just it's an exceptional
Feature or
property that is like known to be of an exceptional character for maybe different reasons, or maybe like if a land scores, this and that, it gets a bonus or something, because it just has a bunch of these things and qualities that we're looking for that sort of makes it rise to the top, I don't know. That was just sort of my thought, because I think that like obviously Catamount's an exceptional piece of property, but that was a very long and strategic conversation, but anyways.
Yeah.
Eric?
I think just trying to remember back to when we were developing this the first time around. I think that acreage category that you have on the screen that Reed was proposing we remove is in a way it is a way to sort of get at that exceptionalism element that you were just talking about, Dave, where we just we felt like it was important to really call out and prioritize large tracts of land that still remain in town. And this acreage category was, while it seemed like it was double counting with some of the other elements in this prioritization scheme, it was a way to really emphasize the importance of large tracts of land and to conserve them.
Then maybe we'll talk a bit more of that when we touch briefly on the active strategy, because that's, I think, more of that exceptional parcel
right.
mindset, maybe more of like an active strategy thing. Like, let's make a list of 5 to 10 parcels that we would like to actively work on rather than waiting for them to come to us. Yeah. So there's not a lot of changes for the remaining ones, so it'll be pretty quick. So Lisa, we thought it's in good shape. View sheds, we think it should stay because when the question came to us in the last year, should we even keep view sheds as a thing? We said yes, but we need to update the maps, and so we think it should stay, and when the maps are updated, that can be incorporated into these scores. Then we get into constraints section, and the constraints, there's an opportunity to update the undeveloped versus developed land, because since 2020, a lot has changed. Parcels have been developed, parcels have been conserved, so on. Open space was good. Wetland constraint was good. SFHA is the flood hazard areas. That one might require that one, and slope might require just a little bit more research, but they should stay. And sewer service area, we didn't have any changes. One thing that we could consider is whether there's value in adding our SWHA data set, or does that just duplicate things that are already in here? So was on with a question mark. And trail links. Yeah, we talked about trail links already. Okay, so that was the passive strategy stuff. So basically what you can see is, as we sort of thought, there's not a ton of changes. It would be like update a little bit of data here, maybe remove or add one element, and make sure that the thresholds are in good shape. And that would basically be it for the passive. We did talk very briefly about an active strategy, which is going to take a more focused session and is going to need to involve a lot more input from the rest of the commissioners, because it is an opinion based, right? It's a strategy. It's not objective with numbers. It's more subjective. What are those exceptional parcels? What is like something that we want to be able to rally public support around? Like, hey, we want to conserve 70% of our Winooski waterfront. permanently or whatever the case may be. So that'll require a little bit more conversation. But as we began to discuss it, some of the themes that came out were wanting to preserve waterways, selecting specific waterways, maybe it's Muddy Brook, maybe it's Allen Brook, maybe it's Winooski, to select them and say, okay, now we're gonna look up and down that waterway and see what needs to be conserved. For instance, headwaters are very important for water quality. Animals, so for natural value for animals, so that's looking at like special connectors, road crossings, things like that, that would be good to go after, not because somebody's coming to us, but because we want to actively make this area an area that wildlife can move freely. And finally, human recreation, which would include things like accessibility and like river access, as well as just functional value. So the ability to have places where it's safe for people to go into the water because the water is clean and
Yeah,
so.
I would put Brownell and Big Bend in the same.
Exactly, yeah, and a place to hike, a place
Yeah.
to picnic, things like that. So we do think
Cool.
the active strategy is ready to take a look at, and if anybody has questions or concerns about this, feel free to chat with me or Dave, and we hope to bring forward something more visual at a later stage. Maybe it's next meeting, maybe it's the one after, where we can say, how would things change if we adjusted some of the stuff?
I think it would also be helpful to understand if a project came to us and it matched some of the passive criteria, what exactly would a ERF process look like? Because it does seem really hard for us to like insert ourselves into the conversation. All of a sudden, we're just like, I know you're thinking about 10 home sites, but what if we just paid you for it? It's like,
what if there's
what would
purchases
that-
you don't have to go through the
yeah, like what would
development
that process even look like?
Well, I think what I would say to that is, yeah, I think thinking of our conservation strategies in terms of active or passive is a useful way to look at it, because when sites come in for development, this information is essentially coded into the process. The first thing that shows up on one of the first things that shows up on the staff report is, what is the ERF priority of this parcel? So, okay, there's a proposal to subdivide this area. It's in the ARZD, there's open space development. This is a high priority parcel. We're gonna take it pretty seriously that this open space is, really thoughtfully including all of the elements. There's gonna be maybe a discussion with the applicant about what that could look like, whether, there is a possibility for some kind of public benefit with that open space. So that's the way I would think about this, in terms of passive strategies, not necessarily that it's coming to the WCC as some sort of independent event to consider whether or not there might be an opportunity for conservation, but it's actually being baked into the process. And those conversations are happening with the DRB, they're happening with the Conservation Commission during review, they're happening with the planning staff, because the parcel is already risen to the top for these various reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Or hey, you've got two subdivided lots and an open space lot. Could the town consider purchasing one of them because it would provide access to the Winooski, or because it would provide access to a hiking area that we've been trying to get access to?
Yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you for the update. I think more to come. And it sounds great, and yeah, reach out to Reed and Dave if you have more questions.
Can I just ask a question about the connectivity versus interior forest blocks? So when I went to the state conservation plan meeting back in July, I think. And this is statewide, so they really emphasize that most conserved land is the interior for forest blocks and not as much connectivity, which may be different in Williston, because we're not the whole state. But that was one of the takeaways, is that statewide, they felt like they needed to focus more on connectivity than interior forest blocks.
Yeah, I think that we've had that conversation too, that there's, and you'll have a perspective from a fish and wildlife experience, but there's this idea that like, if you just focus on habitat blocks, but that habitat block gets cut off from everything else around it, it doesn't remain functional, because animals don't just live in one place all the time. And so we do have to think about the connectivity as well as the core blocks where maybe the wildlife can spend most of their time. And I think Laura, you brought up like the culverts. And I know at the state level, they're working on replacing culverts as they do them with larger ones, which will open up more opportunities to conserve land near those culvert crossings under highways and stuff, so that we regain some of the connectivity we've already lost through development.
Yeah, it relates to the challenge of how you evaluate the potential for conservation as it relates to the size of the parcel. Is the size is such an overwhelming factor in whether conserving the parcel is good value for the dollar. That what happens is we have land trusts and municipalities and state organizations that over time have gone after these larger blocks, which is a great place to start. But if you try to look at connectivity and how everything is connected so that we can have effective long distance corridors for climate migration, for wide ranging mammals, for aquatic connectivity, all these various things, what you have to do is go after these smaller, low value parcels that, you know, if you look at them on their own, you would say, why, you know, well, it doesn't meet these various thresholds. So it's only when you look at it in sort of combination with the whole pattern that we can understand that, okay, it's actually important to spend money on conserving this smaller parcel. And that's kind of the state we're in as a whole in Vermont, is we've got a great start to the conservation work in certain areas. Often those areas where there are large parcels, you know, Northeast Kingdom, the Green Mountains, but in places where there's been a lot of development, a lot of subdivision, where there's been a lot of fragmentation, we're missing a lot of the connectors between those blocks, the low value connectors that actually are higher value than they might seem at face value.
So should we give more weight to that? Like right now, just as I was scanning this, it sort of was like, is this a connector 1 point, 2 point? Like where it's sort of just fitting into the rest of.
Yeah, should we bump the points up for connectivity if that is something we really wanna go after?
Yeah, or should we make connectivity, put it in that exceptionalism category, like we.
I was gonna say the active strategy might be a good home for that, to say like, okay, let's zoom out, let's talk to our neighboring towns about what they've conserved and start looking at a landscape level and say, well, maybe that wouldn't have shown up as a high priority on our map, but we're gonna go after it anyway because it creates this connection.
I mean, practically speaking, I agree with all of what you're saying, but practically speaking, if we're gonna use environmental reserve fund money, it's gonna be a very public sort of facing acquisition, right? I mean, we don't just spend 1,000 here and 2,000 there. I mean, it's, you know, ERF money it's public money, so it's gonna,
Select board has to vote on it. And
yeah, so like I hear that, but I also think that like realistically, when we spend money, it's gotta be public facing, and like, is that really what the public's gonna sort of get behind and support, you know? It seems like the connectivity has a higher value in the passive strategy, because that's where we want to say like, oh, this is like, whoa, this is really good, small thing that we want to preserve for connectivity. I mean, like, candidly, that was a huge part of the project we were just talking about.
Right.
one thing we can consider is adding a factor that doesn't just, well, so what does our connectivity one do in here? Right now it looks at,
It just connectivity blocks, which is, remember, that's based on a statewide prioritization.
so we might want a more localized, like we could come up with our own layer that incorporates where we think we need connectivity in rough swaths, and then that layer could be factored in for points.
Yeah, that's
Well,
that's the corridors.
yeah, there is an existing data set that's helped us do that, which is the
SWHA.
wildlife road crossings data set from Vermont Conservation Design, which was also updated in 2023.
Our SWHA also has tier 1 and tier 2 crossings already in there. And so that's part of why I mentioned SWHA, is even if we don't use the SWHA for the habitat block portion, even just using SWHA tier 1, tier 2 connections, I think it's called, Or crossings, I can't remember, but whatever that connectivity piece is, that might be a valuable point. Item to add in.
Okay,
Okay,
we need to leave it there for now. Dave, how much do we need for the executive session? Is it worth going through the CBU projects or kicking that? to
I
the
would
next week?
suggest, my suggestion would be that we table the other business until next time.
Great,
There's not an immediate urgent
nope,
need to look at the budget in terms of VMN, we can look at that next time. And we can, same with the CVU projects, there's not an urgent thing, but I think it would be helpful to have the executive sessions planned.
great. So then let's table the other business for next month. I'm fine with that, or next week, 2 weeks from now, and then go into executive session. So executive session means we're gonna turn the recording off, not have a public record. These will also not end up in the minutes, right?
Yeah, so what we need for that is a motion, and executive session as a tool is appropriate when, you know, the commission has an opportunity to discuss pending real estate transaction, for recommendations you might want to make for the select board, for which public knowledge of the situation could potentially put the town at a disadvantage, or it's not
Okay.
the right time to share that. So
Is Eric allowed to stay on Zoom? Looks like.
yes,
Lisa
we
jumped off.
can, we'll end the public session, so any members of the public will ask to leave the Zoom, we'll end recording. And then we can continue.
Great. Can we get a motion?
I'll move, we enter executive session to discuss potential real estate transaction.
Do we need to second? And-
Yeah.
We do.
Okay,
I'll second that.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
Moving into executive session. We'll wait for Dave to pause the recording. Thank you for that explanation too. That was.
Yes, that should go in our orientation packet.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.